What's up, guys? 1-1 yesterday, so another slight loss. Not great. Georgetown did not get there, unfortunately, and the Washington Capitals jumped out to a 4-0 lead in the first period and then didn't score again and almost blew the whole game. And it was 4-3, I think, by the end of the second period, but they hung on and won, still got that nice underdog money line cash, so at least there was that. Washington Capitals saving the day a little bit there, at least. College basketball was just a minefield yesterday, man. Like, none of those leans really got there. Northwestern got absolutely annihilated, which some of the reasons I stayed off of that, just that KenPom had that line at 10. Illinois almost got swept in the season series last year. And in the second of those two games, Northwestern was blowing them out at Illinois. And Illinois had to make a huge comeback near the end to get that win, which was being referenced during the game last night. But Illinois absolutely destroyed them. So a lot of teams that were not in the greatest spots in college basketball still were doing it yesterday. So looking at college basketball today, man, there are a lot of games where I lean against them. But right now I'm only actually on one game. So I lean against Stanford. They're at UCLA. If you look at what happened here, UCLA, or what is happening here, I guess UCLA is sitting around a 4.5 point favorite. I think KenPom might have this at about 4. I don't totally trust UCLA here, but Stanford is coming off basically a monumental upset. They just beat Arizona, man. That was a crazy, crazy upset win, beating Arizona. They're coming off that. Now they have to go out on the road. My only issue here is that Stanford might still be focused on UCLA because it is UCLA. It's an in-state bigger brother. It's a big-name team, so they might not be totally unfocused, even though they are absolutely in a letdown spot. They beat Arizona as 12.5 point underdogs. Stanford might be a little bit better than we actually think they are. That was a huge upset, though, and they shot 64% from three-point range and 58% from the field. Just kind of ridiculous there, so I would only look to UCLA's direction there, but UCLA is also off of kind of a big game that they just had against Oregon as well. So I'm just going to stay off that one, but that one, interesting for sure. Missouri State is off of, I believe, a big upset. Where are they at here? Missouri State. And they're also actually, even though this is like the home opener for this section of the conference play, the actual conference play, they actually did already have a conference home opener early in the season against Evansville. They've already played a couple of conference games so far. They just beat St. Mary's as 13.5 point underdogs. That's a huge upset for Missouri State. Now they're coming back home. Will they be totally unfocused for resuming conference play, though, against Northern Iowa? I'm not so sure about that. Missouri State's only laying 2.5, though, so it looks way too easy to take the team that just upset St. Mary's and has the better record there, just laying 2.5. It does look too easy. Northern Iowa, they just won at Northern Illinois, like not a very impressive win there, really, but this is the second straight road game as well, although it is to start conference play. So there are just things that keep me off of that a little bit. KenPom has the number at 3 on that one, I think, but I do lean to Northern Iowa there. Missouri State, like I said, coming off a huge upset win. I think there was one other team coming off of some huge upset besides the game that I'm on, but maybe I'm wrong. I'll have to look at that. And then I do lean to Nebraska against Indiana. Indiana continues to thrive on name recognition, and their record is pretty good so far, but they don't have any impressive wins so far. Michigan on the road, I guess, is their best win so far. And they did play Kansas tough not too long ago, but they're going into Nebraska for their first road game. KenPom actually has this at 7, I think, even though the actual line in this game right now is, I think, Nebraska up from 5 to 5.5. So it is creeping up. So I'd try to get in on Nebraska before it gets out of control if you do like Nebraska there, which I do. I'm just not quite so sure I can get involved in this. Indiana just beat Kennesaw State, which is kind of like, who cares, really? Indiana shot very well in that game, though, like kind of an outlier type of field goal percentage there. Although they were supposed to win the game, they did. Nebraska is coming off a game that doesn't matter at all against SC State. I think both of these teams might not have played since before the holiday break as well. No, I'm wrong about that. Nebraska did. No, they both did. Excuse me. They both played one game after that. But I do like Nebraska. I just think Indiana's going to thrive on name recognition and recreational guys are going to come in and say, how is Nebraska favored by this much? They're Nebraska. But I do lean to Nebraska on that one just because that's kind of like what the sentiment is going to be there. And then I don't think there was any other game I was going to talk about. So jumping into and then Indiana State, I think, is coming off a pretty big game against Michigan State. So I would tend to just kind of stay away from that. Like, they played pretty tough against Michigan State deep into that game. But this is going to be their conference. Not their conference home opener, but it is the start of conference play for like the regular start of conference play here against Evansville. But they do have Northern Iowa next. I don't know. Neither of those teams are doing that well this year, though. So I don't know. But they are off a pretty big game against Michigan State, but I'll just stay away from that. Indiana State, I think, they're up from 13 to 14 and a half as well, so I'll stay away. And then actually the other game I was going to mention, maybe this is the one I was thinking of, is that who was it? San Diego State just upset Gonzaga. That was a huge win at Gonzaga as well, 6.5 point underdog. San Diego State, actually a pretty good team this year. And Gonzaga, maybe a little bit down this year. But that was a big win for San Diego State. But they are starting conference play. This is their conference home opener, even though it is against Fresno, who's not one of the better teams in the conference. Will they totally overlook their conference home opener? Maybe not, but they're coming off a big win over Gonzaga. And San Diego State has dropped. They're a huge favorite, though. They've dropped from 17 to 15 and a half. And I think Ken Palm has this number at 18. The actual game I'm going to be on, though, I'm fading Notre Dame, man. Notre Dame, they came out of the holiday break and they upset Virginia on their home floor. It was like, I think they were like a 9.5 point underdog in that game. They wiped out Virginia, man. Notre Dame, as a 9.5 point dog, they absolutely blasted Virginia. Huge win for Notre Dame. Virginia, much better record than Notre Dame. Notre Dame, not a very good team. Notre Dame shot out of their minds, 51% from the field to 38% for Virginia, 47.8% from three-point range to Virginia's 18.2%. So Virginia had a pretty down shooting night, even though they're mostly known for their defense. I think Notre Dame's got to be feeling all high and mighty, man, and that was only a couple days ago. They drilled Virginia in their ACC home opener. They got NC State coming in now, and they might be in a letdown spot. And up 3 days from now on Saturday, they got Duke coming into their house, man, Duke. So I think this is a sandwich spot between Virginia and Duke, even though NC State has a pretty good record and they're a pretty known commodity. NC State has not played since before the holidays, even though they were on a winning streak going into the holidays. They beat St. Louis and Detroit Mercy. Who cares? Went into the holiday break. Coming out of the holiday break, now they're starting conference play. I think they're going to be focused on Notre Dame, and they saw what Notre Dame just did the other day. I don't think they're going to be able to overlook Notre Dame here. People are going to see that Notre Dame just beat Virginia like that and think, how is Notre Dame getting points here, even though NC State does have the better record? It just looks kind of suspicious for Notre Dame to be an underdog at home, I think. But Notre Dame is really not that good. North Carolina State, definitely the better team in this game. Ken Baum has Notre Dame all the way down at a 171 ranking, which is really bad. He's got this game at 5. I'm laying 4.5 with NC State. That's play number 1. I think it's a sandwich spot for Notre Dame. It's a bad spot for them. They just had a massive blowout upset win over Virginia, and they got Duke coming up in 3 days, man. NC State's been off for a while. I don't think that holiday break will break their momentum. When you got ACC play starting and you know what Notre Dame just did, I think you're going to be focused on it. So I like NC State there. That's my play in college basketball. I'm skipping hockey. There are only 2 hockey games today. I just don't really like either one of them. I know that Toronto just won last night in LA, so they're probably in the worst spot in that one going into Anaheim, kind of a letdown spot. But Toronto had days off before they played that game at LA, and they only have a game against San Jose up next, so I'll just stay away from that, even though Toronto's kind of a substantial road favorite and a public road favorite. Going to the NBA, I have a few leans, but the market is kind of keeping me off of a couple of them. I lean to the Bulls, but the market's keeping me off of that one a little bit. The Knicks are up from 7.5 to 9.5. Bulls have 88% of the tickets and 61% of the cash on them. So somehow it looks like the Bulls are like a road public square underdog right now. I don't know how that's the case. I don't know why the public would be on the Chicago Bulls, but maybe the like recreational bettors are just catching up to these, like how bad these back-to-backs are. I don't know, but the Knicks are in a bad spot. They've had one day off. They came back home and they did not suffer the distraction spot coming back home. They had a big game against Minnesota. Minnesota coming in, they beat Minnesota, huge win. They got Chicago sandwiched in here, and they got the Philadelphia 76ers coming up on Friday in 2 days. So it is definitely a sandwich spot for the Knicks. So I would only look to take Chicago here, but the market is keeping me off of it a little bit. And the Chicago Bulls, they did just lose yesterday, so that kind of keeps me off a little bit as well, just because they are on a back-to-back. It's not quite the best spot for them, really, but they didn't play for 2 days before that, so they did have 2 days off before that, so not really the worst scheduling spot for them. And they did get blasted last night by the 76ers, which was a quick revenge for the 76ers, if you will, because the Bulls had beaten them in the prior game. So the Philadelphia kind of like zigzagged there and beat up Chicago at home yesterday, but still Chicago did have to it was still a game that you get up like emotionally for still. And with no time off on the back-to-back and the market looking a little sketchy, I'll stay off it, but it is a sandwich spot for the Knicks. The other game that I think is a bad spot is the Thunder, but the market's kind of questionable on this one too, with the Thunder down from 2 to 1.5 as a road favorite. Although I think they'd be favored by more than that. So I think the market has adjusted a bit to the fact that the Thunder, are in a bad spot, not a back-to-back. But this looks like the Hawks have 75% of the tickets and 60% of the cash. So somehow this looks like the Hawks have the public action, which really doesn't make sense. Like why would the Thunder not be the public team here? So maybe that's inaccurate. I don't know. But what the market's showing me right now, I don't really like it. The Hawks, like I said, maybe the recreational bettors are catching up to how bad these back-to-backs are and how obvious some of these letdown spots are. I don't know. But the Hawks, it looks like the cash discrepancy is somehow on the Thunder here, even though the line has moved down on the Thunder a little bit. And we saw what the Thunder did last night, man. They beat the Celtics. Big win for the Thunder. They don't really have a huge game upcoming, though, but they are on a back-to-back. They are playing a third game in 4 days and a fourth game in 6 days. But the last 2 of those are at home after they went into Denver, beat Denver, came back home, didn't suffer the letdown against Brooklyn, won that game. I thought it was a sandwich spot. I was against Oklahoma City there and got burned again. Then they beat Boston. Now they go out on the road with no days off. Yeah, it's a tough spot going to Atlanta. Are you going to be totally focused on Atlanta, who hasn't been playing that well? I don't know. And Atlanta has had a couple days off. I think in their previous game, they only beat the Wizards by 4, so that isn't a great game. But that did also break their loss streak. They had a 4-game loss streak, so that does break their momentum. They're losing momentum, and they have multiple days off, and that was an ugly win over Washington that did not look very good. So everything about the situation does line up on Atlanta here, on taking the points with Atlanta. There's no doubt about that. The market is just showing me things that I can't quite get involved in there. Oklahoma City, obviously, certainly in the letdown spot. They're in the much worse rest spot, but the odds makers are definitely adjusting to account for the rest spot, because Oklahoma City is the way better team here. But again, because of all that, the line also looks suspicious, and it almost looks too easy to take Oklahoma City. And when it's too easy, it usually is. So I do still lean to the Hawks there, but I can't quite do it. And Oklahoma City has burned me too much, man. I think they're undefeated on the back end of back-to-backs this year. They beat me every time they're in one of these bad spots. I go against Oklahoma City and they still win and they still cover like every single time. I just don't want to get burned again. So I'm not going to do it. And then the play that I'm actually on is the Sacramento Kings, even though this line is up from, it looks like it opened at 2.5 at some point, and they're up to 5.5. Even though it looks like they have 95% of the tickets and 90% of the cash. So I don't like that they're public, but we might see that turn around. I don't even know, man. The market's just hard to read this early in the morning. I'm reading the situation, and this situation is real bad for Orlando, and I think it's a much more positive for the Sacramento Kings. Orlando, they're playing a back-to-back in different cities. They're playing a third game in 4 nights, all in different cities. They're playing a fourth game in 6 days, all in different cities. And it's also a fifth game in 8 days and a 6th game in 9, with only 2 of those games being at home. So 4 out of the 6 of those games in different cities. 5 different cities out of the what is this? It's 6 games in 9 days now in 5 different cities. So totally ridiculous scheduling spot. They've had a jammed schedule since the Christmas break there that they had. They've played so many games since then. They've just been running through a gauntlet, and they're on the West Coast road trip here. And on the West Coast road trip, they're 0-2. So you might think, well, they're going to bounce back here, but they're in a back-to-back. They're in a third game in 4 days, all in different cities, and they played 2 get-up games so far on this road trip, man. They played at the Phoenix Suns. That was a tough battle. They stayed in that game almost the whole time and just lost right at the end. And then last night, another tough battle for the Orlando Magic. They were in the game against the Warriors all the way to the end, pretty much a tough game again against the Warriors. They did not quit in that game either. Now, how much are they going to have left in the tank after those 2 huge wins? Now they get Sacramento, which might be sort of the lesser of those 3 teams, even though Sacramento does have a good record. They tend to get overlooked because of their name, whatever. Golden State carries all that name recognition, has all that star power. Phoenix, we know that they're a really good team as well. And 2 days from now on Friday, Orlando has Denver up next. So I think this looks like a sandwich spot, too. This is an awful, awful spot for Orlando. I think it's going to be tough for them to get off the mat after those really tough last 2 games that they had. They're going into Sacramento. Sacramento's in a much better spot, even though they are also in a back-to-back. That is true, but they had 2 days off before the back-to-back. They returned home. I mentioned they were in a return home spot yesterday, although they had 2 days off on the return home to try to get their affairs in order. They lost as 16.5-point favorites to the Charlotte Hornets last night, man. Come on. So even though they are in a back-to-back, really, you just lost as huge, huge favorites to the Charlotte Hornets last night. And when a team has such an embarrassing performance in that return home spot, they tend to be in a positive spot in the next game. That's the spot that Sacramento is in. They're in a spot where they got to turn it around, man. That's a totally embarrassing loss to the Charlotte Hornets as huge favorites. I don't know how you dropped that game, although it was, again, a return home spot. So, and they're returning home off of blasting Memphis, who now has Ja there. So maybe they were feeling a bit high on themselves. They ran into those distractions. Now I think they get to put those distractions out of the way. They know how bad they played yesterday, even though it is a back-to-back. Both of these teams are on the back-to-back. At least Sacramento is not going anywhere, and they get to try to redeem themselves for that awful performance last night. I think they're in a spot to turn this thing around, even though the line is kind of accounting for this spot a little bit there. I think the Kings are the slightly better team of the Magic. I think we're seeing that the Magic aren't as good as we actually thought they were. They had a great start to the season. Kings didn't have as good of a start to the season, but they're showing that they're a little bit better than we thought they were. So things are turning around a little bit. I think if the spot was thrown out of the equation here, I think the Kings would probably be about a 4-point favorite or so here. I would say would be about accurate because I think they're a slightly better team than the Magic are. I'm still laying the 5.5 here. I think the spot dictates it. It's a terrible spot for the Magic. Those are my 2 actual plays here. And I mentioned like a bunch of these other leans with things that just keep me off it a little bit. The 2 actual plays, I'm laying 2 favorites today, man. So God help me. College basketball, NC State -4.5, and NBA Sacramento Kings -5.5. Let's get it, man. Let's have a winning day. Come on, let's do it. Have a good day. Good Wednesday. Peace.